Hey, hi. Good morning, everyone. It's really good to finally be able to put a face on basically all the names that I've been discussing stocks with over the past many years in Stockbit. So it's very good. I would like to basically know a lot more of you on a more personal level after this. Yeah, so I think just a little bit of background touching on to what Sachi have mentioned earlier. I think it was about close to exactly 5 years ago today, where I would say, my founder friends of Stockbit in Indonesia were basically, we just have a chat and say, hey, Rondy, why don't we just put like 1,000 tickers of Malaysian stocks, and you try and build Stockbit in Malaysia, start the discussions over there. And I was like, okay, yeah, why not? Let's just do it. So that was about 5 years ago, and of course, in the span of 5 years, a lot of things have happened, and that is why I think my speech today is going to be about. It's more about the lessons that I've learned of basically having built Stockbit in Malaysia. What do I see in the market, and try and hopefully share some of the more important things, because honestly, half an hour is a little bit short. So maybe to expand on whatever I'm going to be saying later, maybe we can just hang out outside. So yeah, a couple of things first, right? So I just want to have a disclaimer. So none of what I'm going to say or present here shall be considered as a financial advice, please. And of course, in the stock market, I've actually made many gains, as well as losses, a lot of them in the past many years. So I'm by no means should be like considered a guru or sifu or whatever. That's not who I am. So in Stockbit, I think for a lot of the RGBs and the Wasco and the PMB tech that we have discussed, there is also the PES tech and the Yong Tai that I've made in the past. So definitely I still have a lot of things to learn. There are definitely still a lot of unknowns that I need to discover over time as well. And a lot of the things that I mentioned over here are all my personal views and my personal interpretation of things. So yours may be completely different. And lastly, I think I just want to highlight, that my day-to-day job is basically to sit down, watch the market, analyze companies, and sometimes ramble and write something in Stockbit. So I'm actually an introvert by nature, and I have no public speaking experience. So yeah, please pardon my nerves. A lot of people have been saying, yeah, but Rondy, you have done so many online briefings and all that, But honestly speaking, online briefings, I don't see people's faces, like now. So it's completely different. But yeah, so I think just like the way I like to post things on Stockbit, when it comes to storytelling, I like to put summary first. So I think I just want to highlight on what are the things that I'm going to be talking about for the next 30 minutes. The first thing I want to highlight is basically, I want to focus a lot on the journey and the progression of a lot of us here as a retail market participants. I want to highlight a little bit about the pyramid of knowledge as a retail market participant, the different types of investors and trader that I think defines what a retail market participant is in Malaysia. And then I also want to talk about what I understand in, what drives the stock prices in Bursa Malaysia. And this actually is quite personal to me, because when I first come into the market, just like many of you, I have been very fundamental focused. And I think over time, when you level up, you sort of try and understand that, things may not just be based on fundamentals. Things could be based on liquidity as well, yeah? Because those are the things that moves the market. And I also want to highlight on basically how the media, the technology, the information that we consume, how it actually have shaped the Bursa Malaysia as the way it is today. And lastly is, I want to sort of hope to end it in a positive manner for Bursa Malaysia, because what I see from where I'm sitting is that, Bursa Malaysia have got a lot of flaws and has a lot of negative stigma. But honestly, in my deepest, sincere opinion, a lot of us can actually level up our wealth from the local market. Yeah, so that is what I'm going to be talking about today. So yeah, a lot of the things that I'll be talking about today would be a component of 4 parts, right? So just like any market, like basically your wet market, I think Tamantun have got a wet market here, right? So in a wet market, what do you see? Normally, you basically bring yourself. So this is you. And then you go into the market and you go and buy the things that you want to buy. So in stock market, in Bursa Malaysia, the things that you buy, the products are basically the companies, right? These are the companies, the products that you want to buy. And of course, there will be like many, many sellers. So these are basically what we call as the market participants in the market. And lastly, there will be like a lot of other elements that helps you on buying whatever that you want to buy, the products. Maybe this could be your personal income and all those things, you know. So these are all the other elements. So today I'll be focusing on these 4 components. I would like to label them as components, okay? Components that defines the local stock market. Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to focus and zoom in on the most important component of the stock market, and that is basically yourself. So, of course, all of us, we are all different individuals. We have got different set of skills. We've got different set of characteristics. We have got different emotional maturity, different beliefs, financial goals, risk profile, and all these sort of things. So it is actually very important to understand and define what kind of investor you are and what kind of investors you want to be. And I think this, honestly speaking, I think in Bursa Malaysia, this is probably the part where I think a lot of people are lacking, because a lot of people don't really know what is it that they want to do in the stock market. And just like the famous Benjamin Graham say, right, actually investors' chief problem and even his worst enemy is likely to be himself. So I think I just want to roll back in, I think about 2020 to 2022 about the glove mania and the glove saga, which I think everybody knows here, right? So over there, I think we can learn a lot of things. We can look into greed. You know, people like pasar people are going into the market and buying at a certain glove stocks because of greed, because of like fear of missing out. And then there's basically fear. And I think towards the end, during the bust cycle, a lot of blame game. Everybody blame everybody. You know, like I see retailers blaming like maybe like the analysts from JP Morgan or Macquarie. People are blaming Lim Wee Chai because of certain things that he do. So I think there's a lot of blame game. But I think at the end of it all, if you take a step back, a lot of people need to realize that a lot of things, maybe we should just internalize and look into ourselves first. So there is basically what I would say, this is the typical journey of a retail investor. All of us starts from a non-investor. Yeah, so we don't know where to start, you know. And when we first come into the market, it is based on emotions, it is based on tips, and we buy into certain stocks. But I think towards the end, you want to be at the top of the pyramid. This is basically what I'll define as an experienced investor. So the goal here, as a personal investor, is to get up into the pyramid as fast as you can with the least amount of basically mistakes and costs to yourself, like financial costs and all this sort of thing. So at the very top are what I would call the more experienced investors. These are investors that, you know, they know businesses and they have met a lot, or even some of the managements in Bursa Malaysia, and they understand the cycles of the most companies in Bursa Malaysia. They can quickly sift through good companies and bad companies from their experiences. And they understand completely what is market dynamics, right? Like what are the macro trends that will impact the fundamentals of a company and whatnot. And they understand and they know players in the market. They know some analysts, they know some fund managers, they know some important people and liquidity providers to make the most of their position sizing. Means, okay, this stock, I'm going to put 10% of my capital. This stock, I'm going to put 5%. With the lowest opportunity cost. Opportunity cost, I would like to consider that as time. You know, like sometimes you buy into a stock, maybe you have to wait 1 year before that stock goes up in accordance to what you expect. Sometimes the stock can go maybe like 5 years. Yeah, so these are opportunity costs. And at the top, you basically have got total control in emotions and you stick to your principles. And what is important is that at the top even, you actually still lose money. You actually still make bad decisions, but you win a lot more. So again, in summary, what I'm trying to say as a journey of a retail investor is that you will want to reach the higher level of the pyramid in the shortest amount of time and at the least amount of cost to yourself. Yeah, so after many years in Bursa Malaysia, I think this is typically what I would probably categorize the different types of investors that I see in Bursa Malaysia. I think sometimes it is very clear about what sort of investor that you want to become. There are basically the category number one. These are basically the short-term or technical and tactical traders. These are people like my friend Shafiq here, who is basically a very good chartist, who's a very good technical traders. So normally people in this part of the spectrum, they disregard much of fundamentals and valuation. Yeah. So they play a lot on rumors, volume, noise, volatility and trend. These are basically the most important component of why they're in the market. But this type of investor and trader, they also exactly know that they can, they don't have all the information, and for them, it is important to be disciplined, to know when to take profit and when to cut loss. So sometimes when I speak to Shafiq, right, it's like, yeah, maybe he made 20%, he took profit, and then the stock just doubled. But he doesn't, for him, he already knows that, it is, whatever that he's traded is done and dusted. So the second type of investor I would consider is like the dividend investor. So for this sort of investor, the important part of that is about, it's okay. So the dividend investor, I think their goal in the stock market is to have yield, to basically get cash flow, consistent cash flow. And these are basically suitable for people that invest in blue chips, good stable companies that pays regular dividends, okay? And the companies that falls under these categories typically consist of profitable, sometimes are ex-growth companies already. Now, the third and fourth type of investor, in my personal opinion, in Bursa Malaysia, is where a lot of people are getting mixed up. So this number 3 and number 4, I see a lot of investors or other people that wants to be an investor in Malaysia wants to be one of this, they go for some sort of like value investment courses. They want to be like the next Warren Buffett. They want to be a long-term investor. But the thing is, there's two problems in that. Because in my personal opinion, and this is my personal opinion, there is not many companies in Malaysia that actually complies to the principles of long-term value investor. Because long-term value investing, typically what are the sort of idea that you have when you talk about Warren Buffett value investment principles that is being taught probably from some academies. These are the idea normally is surrounds by the ideas of investing in good stocks and hold it for like 5 to 10 years. Disregard on market timing and just do like dollar cost averaging over time. Every time you have money, then you just dollar cost average. Long-term fundamentals managements are basically the key. Yeah, so it is most important for this type of investor to know what to invest. To invest in companies that, over time it will always ends up higher than where the point of view investment. But yeah, I think in Malaysia, it is very difficult to find this because a lot of the Malaysian companies actually falls under, or rather it should be categorized in a lot more cyclical sort of like short-term investment type of investor, right? So now, over time, I think I realized that in Malaysia, and especially there's a lot of short-term investor as well. So short-term investor, they are still investors, but they realize that in Malaysia, a lot of the companies are very cyclical. Okay, so they find inefficiency from the market from an angles of maybe trend or value re-rating or potential earnings upgrade in the short term. But they also understand that there is a time limit in this particular cycle. They know when exactly to take profit and move on to the next hot thing, like move on to the next good fundamental companies. They will still invest only in good fundamental stocks, but they know that those good fundamental stocks, there's a time limit. Doesn't matter, maybe it's from the point of view from value, or maybe the good earning cycle has ended, then they move on to the next one. So yeah, this is actually very suitable for those who is very active, who is able to adapt and have a feel of the market. So I think these are basically the type of investors that are present in Malaysia today. And I think that is why it is very, very important to know what type of investors you are and align yourself accordingly. Yeah. So the component number 2 in the stock market is basically the companies, or rather what I'll call the products, right? So the companies, of course, in Bursa Malaysia, there is about 1,000 companies in Bursa Malaysia. Recently, I find myself a little bit positive about the market because I find that there are some interesting IPOs that is coming on. Okay, and I suppose over the past 5 years, especially with Stockbit, right, I have had the privilege and the opportunity to host and to meet many, many different public listed company founders and CEOs. So what I come to understand is that, again, for the companies in Bursa Malaysia, I would like to categorize them in 5 different categories. So in Bursa Malaysia, 5 different categories of companies. The type number 1 is, I would like to label them as the uninvestable companies. So uninvestable companies are typically penny stocks with, poor and even sometimes fraudulent fundamentals, right? So most of the time, these are like part of a complex web of companies that exist in the market, not for them to make money from the businesses, but actually they exist in the market to make money from all of us, from the stock market, all right? And unfortunately, I have taken a look at Bursa Malaysia. Unfortunately, many companies actually fall under this pretext, like it or not. And I think a lot of us have seen this particular article from The Edge, which has got a lot of eyeballs, and if you really look into it, they comprise a lot of stocks, like this web, yeah. Now, the second type of companies in Bursa Malaysia, I would like to label them as hard to invest companies. Yeah, so hard to invest companies are companies that exist in a very, very saturated sectors in the Bursa Malaysia. So this could be like companies in the construction or the property sector. Do you guys know that in the construction and property sectors in itself, there is actually more than 200 companies in the sector, right? So there is, and all of these companies have actually very little in differentiation. So when there are basically 200 of very similar companies, what happens? Then normally the valuation actually comes down, right? Like that is why you hardly see property or construction companies that have got a valuation of PE of more than 10 times, for instance, because there's just too many options there. It's a red ocean. Okay, another type of hard to invest companies are basically companies in Bursa Malaysia which I find are very lacking in transparency and therefore they are very illiquid. You guys, I'm sure, have come across companies when you try and open the annual report and try to understand the businesses. And then you're like, hey, there is literally nothing here, Or maybe you read into some quarterly reports and this is the sort of company that says, oh yeah, this year my earnings goes down because my revenue goes down, full stop. There is no more explanation beyond that. So these are basically these are companies that is extremely hard to invest for, basically either if you're a short-term or long-term investor. And lastly, basically badly managed companies and politically linked companies. So these are basically companies out of which maybe you got like a CEO that is perhaps 25 years old, just because he is someone or it's just companies that is badly managed, yeah. So these are basically hard to invest companies. Now, the type of companies number 3 are basically the large, mature, and ex-growth companies. Of course, they are decently managed, but they're just lacking of growth prospects. And I would say most of the CalCI component companies falls under this category. Okay, now, number 4 and number 5, I would like to label them as the more investable companies. Number 4 are basically your good fundamental companies that is investable, but they are still cyclical in nature. So they are short-term investable companies. A lot of them are actually in the well-run industrial or manufacturing sector in Malaysia. Some of the companies over here could also have performances that is very tied down to maybe a certain commodities or the performance of a certain of their clients, yeah? So that's basically your VS, your SKP, and all those things. And lastly is basically the long-term compounders. Yes, believe it or not, Bursa Malaysia, I believe that there are still long-term compounders in Bursa Malaysia. And these are some of the companies in Bursa Malaysia who are market leaders, like global market leaders, right, in their trade. And they have got Malaysia as a base. And their managements are also very good. They are very good capital allocators. Now, I want to focus on basically the type of companies that falls under number 4 and number 5. So especially on number four and number 5, you would realize something, that the companies that operate in this, more investable companies typically are taking advantage of the advantages they see in Malaysia. So when I talk about what are some of the advantages that Malaysia have, number 1, Malaysia have got basically multicultural. So a lot of people in Malaysia are able to speak at least 3 different languages: English, Bahasa, Chinese, Indian, and all that. So they're actually very competent. Okay, and the second thing is that, unfortunately, like it or not, Malaysia is a cheap labor in comparative to our peers elsewhere, right? Because, our ringgit sucks. Let's just be honest. Our ringgit sucks. So, comparative to Singaporean, maybe our technical level are almost the same, but our wages are 3 times cheaper. So that is why Malaysia is good. And then another advantage of Malaysia is their positioning in the oil and gas sector. I think a lot of Malaysians are, or rather like the really technical oil and gas engineers are very good. So yeah, so there are companies that take advantage of all these goodies about Malaysia. And these are the sort of companies that I think are very investable. So these are companies that are part of an important cog in the global semiconductor supply chain. So these are a lot of the companies in Penang. They are really some of the best, or rather some of the very, very good companies over there. Or these are some companies in the healthcare sector that are benefiting from medical tourism in Malaysia. And like it or not, yes, a lot of people think gloves are crap now, but gloves are actually, Malaysia still holds a global leadership position in glove manufacturing globally with at least more than 50% of market share. Now, number 3, again, coming to oil and gas. I think in oil and gas, Malaysia is very blessed because it is like geographically well positioned in the region. And because Malaysia is actually the world's 3rd largest exporter of LNG, so a lot of people in this part of the industry are actually they are very good comparatively in the technical level. I think John Ho, a friend of mine, who come from the oil and gas segment, he always mentioned that people from Petronas are actually very highly demanded. So you then see that there breeds a lot of very good oil and gas companies in Malaysia. Some of them are leaders in some segments of the oil and gas industry, like the FPSO. So you're talking about companies like Yinson, like MISC. These are global leaders. Companies like Wasco, who is actually one of the 2 only pipe coaters in the world, right? So yeah, there are definitely pockets of opportunities over there. And I think lastly is the cheap and clean energy. I think a lot of people from Sarawak would have known that Sarawak actually produces clean energy. 70% of all the electricity from Sarawak is actually renewable. It comes from hydro. And the government gives industrialists very, very good rate. So making companies like Press Metal and OMH and all that, they are basically the global lowest producer of their trade. Yeah. So now moving on, because I don't have much time. Now moving on to the 3rd component of the market, of the stock market, is basically the market participants. Of course, as everybody knows, every time you buy, there is somebody on the other side who sells. Every time you sell, there is somebody else on the other side who buys. So it is actually very, very important to understand this. And depending on what type of investor you are, understanding liquidity is a very important aspect of your decision making. Yeah. So now, this is a platform which is what we call as D-bots. In Bursa Malaysia, you are categorized by Bursa Malaysia as different types of market participants. There's the institutions, and that comprise of foreign and local institutions. Later, you guys will be privileged enough. You guys will have the opportunity to listen to some of the really top fund managers in Bursa Malaysia. There's the nominees. Nominees are basically derived with high net worth individuals or the owners of companies. There is the uniqueness of the prop traders. I think a lot of you should actually understand how prop traders come in play when it comes to like churning volume. You know, like prop traders, these are basically people who are working for a bank, out of which they have got zero brokerage. They can buy and sell stocks at zero brokerage, and they've got like 1 to 10 million sort of like limit. They can hold a stock between 1 day to 10 days, and their job in the market is really just to churn volume to lure retail market participants to trade, right? And lastly is there's a retailer. Now, the crux of the matter is this, right? By understanding liquidity, by understanding fund flow, it actually helps you to understand how a stock price moves. And typically, the sort of what is deemed as a good sort of like fund flow is when retailers goes one direction and when institutions goes to the other direction. So like when institutions are starting to sell and when retailers are buying, it indicates like a good pattern. So this particular pattern is, I think, from one of the local tech stocks in like 2022, you know. So you see that institutions are starting to sell and then retailers are buying. And then what happened today? That stock price really comes down. So yeah, that's basically the importance of fund flow. Now next, when it comes to liquidity, I think it is also important to understand that market participants and companies, they play together as well in the market. So next I want to highlight is basically float or shareholding structure. I think this is very important to understand. Now, here I have two examples. And these two are basically Stockbit's favorite stocks. On the right side is basically RGB. On the left side is a PMB Tech. Yeah, so there are different types of float, four types of float, I would say. One is owner's float. Second is a controlled public float. Third is dead float. And the last one is active float. So as a rule of thumb, when it comes to float, right, it's like the smaller the float and the smaller the number of shareholders, the lighter it is for a stock to move in a certain direction. It is easier for it to be managed. So, for instance, like PMB Tech. This is PMB Tech. I was comparing PMB Tech in 2018 or 19 versus PMB Tech in 2022. So what you realize is that top 30 shareholders have got 86% of the total shareholding. But within that 5 years, there is only 5 different lines that actually have shifted. What that means is that the family and, I mean, it's a very controlled stock. So the family and the friends, you know, they basically own the entire company. So that is why sometimes when the stock moved, it can move very fast. When the stock supposedly to tank, it is still very maintained at that level. On the second is basically RGB. And RGB, the top 30 only have 55%, and they have got more than 10,000 investors. So what that means is that it actually supposed to take very hard effort for the stock price to move up. So I think that is why when RGB moved this year, it was actually a testament. It's a remarkable feat even, you know. And right now, it is going to be hard if, let's say, the market is not comfortable about it. There is like 50-50 feeling whether it should go up or go down. It will be very hard and very heavy for it to move. So that is what I want to highlight on float. Okay, now basically the fourth element or fourth component of the stock market is basically the other elements. So these are things like the macro factors, you know, like how interest rate plays a part in valuation and all this sort of thing. Local politics lah, ESG lah, and obviously sometimes some companies have got a lot of corporate actions and special situations. So there's a lot of things that plays in the way what drives stock prices on these elements as well. But I think what I want to highlight is that in Malaysia, there is a very interesting ratio when it comes to the fight for eyeballs, you know. Because as a market participant, as a retailer here, what makes us decide to buy and sell a stock is basically the information that we gather, right? Now, do you guys realize that in Malaysia, there's 1,000 companies? But when it comes to like media, like conventional media that you actually consume your information from, there's actually only 3. So basically, you have 1,000 companies here who's trying to get your eyeballs through 3 particular very strong media, which is basically The Edge, The Star, and maybe even Nanyang. Okay, so that is a very important thing to take in and absorb. And that is why you realize over time that companies that actually employs friends in the investment relation that have got like IR, PR firms, normally they fare better than those that do not have them. Because IR and PR firms are able to move these companies into the eyeballs of whatever the target markets are. So that is on the media side. And lastly is technology. We are in the 21st century. Everybody have got a phone, and everybody in their phone, as much as I hate to say it, but everybody right now over here probably will have Galaxy Screener as an application, right? So in Indonesia it's Stockbit, but unfortunately in Malaysia it cannot be that. But yeah, so actually technology plays a very, very important role in the way the market is developed and is being shaped. So this is your typical Galaxy Screener. And what do you see over here is like, yeah, these are all the functions. But do you realize that, you know, the most used information platforms in Malaysia are Galaxy Screener, Malaysia Stockbit, i3 Investor. All of them have got their data and the way they portray their information based on a format that is given by Bursa Malaysia. So if you see over here, you know, this is a summary page of Bursa Malaysia that is given for free, that is being scraped by all the technology providers that we have. All right? So this scrape data, if you see it, it will be then transformed to basically all this sort of like formatting lah, okay? So what I'm trying to say here is that this led to majority of simple-minded, I'm not saying like those investors that really study deep, but simple-minded market participants that is too reliant on earnings-based data on a quarterly basis. So just now I was talking to Peng Lam, and Peng Lam always say, Malaysia, people talk about things on a quarterly basis. It's like, if the quarterly result drop a little bit and miss expectation, the next day it will be sold off like 20%, 10%. I mean, and if it beats quarter to quarter, it will fly like 5, 10%. Yes, it is true, because this is the formatting that we see on a daily basis. Yeah, and but I want to also highlight that this also led to companies in Malaysia that is reporting a lot of accounting frauds. There's a lot of companies in Malaysia, honestly, are probably doing accounting frauds, money laundering, and so on and so forth. Sometimes, you know, when you dig deeper, there's plenty of red flags. So this is a sort of company's balance sheet. What you can see over here are basically a lot of receivables that actually moved into, after 1 year, it is moved into long-term asset, and it is being reclassified as intangible assets or investment in associates and so on and so forth. And what happened is that you will see many, many years of profitability and just 1 year of, yeah. When they think, okay, it is enough, when the auditors think, I cannot defend you anymore, just dump everything. You know? So that is basically your Sabah dynamic there, and yeah, all the others, I don't really want to name names, but I can tell you there's a lot of companies in Malaysia that's like that. Profit, 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 and then just shit everything on you one day. Yeah, so that is the dangers in Bursa Malaysia. And that is why I think there are, unfortunately, a lot of negative stigma in the market. Because a lot of newcomers, a lot of people, a lot of retailers that is still at the bottom pile of the pyramid, they look into it and they see, I cannot win the market. There's just too many frauds in Malaysia. Yeah, which is very unfortunate. Okay, so in summary, I think, you know, my time is up. So in conclusion, I just want to highlight a few things. And I hope that this is something that you guys can bring home with you. The first thing is that, in conclusion, despite all the negative stigmas that we see, there are still good and great companies with strong businesses run by excellent managers in Bursa Malaysia. They really are. And I have personally met them in person. Okay? And you have to also realize that out of the 4 components, in terms of companies, there is actually a smaller pool of supply of these investable companies to really, really familiarize yourself. All right? And there are different types of companies in Bursa Malaysia that is linked to a different type of investors, whatever investors that you are. And lastly, I think there is also a very strong push in transparency in Bursa, which is very, very good. In the past 5 years, I have seen it. So I think this also helps a lot. All right? Secondly is that in Malaysia, there is a small market to really, really understand what drives liquidity and stock prices. So there's a smaller number of market participants. There's a small number of technology platforms that you consume your information from. And there's a small number of media that basically affect your decision making and understanding about the fund flow. So when it comes to like value creation, right, it is actually easier to understand, okay? And I think lastly, when we first come in Malaysia for Stockbit, we look into the community aspects and we think that we can make things better. Because when I see things of whatever that is being discussed in i3 Investor 5 years ago, not saying now it's probably very quiet already, but 5 years ago, it's like, for one good comment, right, there's like 20 shit comments. So it's like very hard to see what is real. So right now, what I'm seeing is that there are pockets of really strong and healthy community. So these are the existence of a lot of genuine educators and academy, people like Zeph from Sharix, even MJ from Viral, right? They have got very, very strong and good community. And a lot of people, like many of you here, you guys are market participants, like retail market participants who are very learned and who are always constantly striving to be better and actually are demanding a lot more on managements. So these two things will really bode well for the future of Bursa Malaysia, in my opinion. So if I can summarize things in one sentence, is that, honestly speaking, there is no shortcut of becoming a successful investor. Everybody will have to go through the same journey. Many, many losses, many, many painful memories, right? From you to go from the bottom to the top of the pyramid. But what I think is in Malaysia, if you really sit down and concentrate and hustle, it may take less time for you to move up the pyramid. And you may actually incur smaller losses to reach higher level of the pyramid. Yeah, so I think with that, I would like to end my session. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Rondy. I think it's a testament to the quality of the session that I've never seen a group of people pay so much attention to the presentation before, so that was awesome. I think we've got a bit of time for a couple of questions. I think just to make it convenient, we'll take it from the floor. Anyone? Any questions? Yeah. Oh, okay. 5, 4, 3.
Now the market, we have this short selling. This will distort whatever the true picture is. Can you elaborate on that? South Korea already stopped short selling already. So what is Malaysia doing?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think short selling is basically part of, I would say, like the component number 4, which is the other elements. And honestly, like short selling is it's not new. In more developed markets, there are short sellings everywhere. Like in the US market, you have all these like put options. And I personally have traded or rather play in the India market and Korea market and Taiwan market. There are basically shorting elements. And I think this is part and parcel of making things very efficient. I personally, I am personally in favor on 2 things about Bursa Malaysia if I can. Number 1 is actually short selling. And number 2 is actually tax on capital gains. Because when you have these 2 things, right, then you start to realize that people are moving towards more efficient market, basically. I think that's something that, yeah, maybe it is harder to play, but there's still pockets of opportunities that you can find over there because things are just more efficient. And maybe because if there's short selling, you might not see many operators around because they are scared.
We've only got time for one more question.
I think short selling is really essential. In fact, if you ask me the opinion, KLSC, the lack of short selling is what makes it what it is today. Short selling is probably one of the key to get rid of all those company control by their owner and investor. With short selling being very pervasive in the market, these people will have, no controlling, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. So that's not a question. Maybe you can get a question.
Okay, last question.
So I understand that a lot of fund managers and your sell side equity analysts, they have information way before some retail investors will pick it up. So from your experience, what is some signals that investors like you or everyone else here can pick up for the investments, especially for a cynical short-term investor, which I suppose generate the most returns?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question, and honestly, I don't see easy answers to that. Of course, one answer would be for you to learn all this like technical analysis, right? Like technical analysis, you are able to sometimes take a look at there is some volume that suddenly appeared and all those things. But it is very, very difficult unless, that is why I said, unless you hustle together. So you hustle together and you go and try and find managements, you demand of them to, you just ask questions from them, and you see, perhaps, hopefully, you can find something in the media somewhere, of things that are there when you actually read in between the lines. But yes, that is one of the, I would say, the disadvantages of the market, but it is the way it is. It's not just in Malaysia, it's actually everywhere as well. So I think that is the part that I would like. Unfortunately, I don't think this is the answer that you're looking for, but that is the part where I feel like sometimes in Malaysia you need to hustle a little bit more and try to find out those pockets of just extra information that you can have for yourself.